about neuro-linguistic programming. To put it simply, that is a way of changing the way you think. You can overcome your fears. You can become happier. If you're scared of a spider, you make it smaller, put a smile on it, make it pink and fluffy, and then it's not so scary anymore. That is the very, very basic theory, but it's not just about phobias. We're asking, have you used neuro-linguistic programming yourself, also known as NLP? I know somebody who went off to get trained in it. There are those who say it's just psycho-bunkum, and it's close to being a cult with a fanatical following, but we're going to speak to somebody who very much believes in it because I'm going to say you invented it. You certainly brought all these techniques together under this phrase, didn't you? So we say, Dr. Richard Bandler, welcome.
Well, it's very nice to be here.
Okay, now I started with phobias and spiders, but I want to just pull back from that if I can and ask you whether this isn't all about people wanting to be happy. Is that what it is?
Well, it's not so much that they want to, it's that it's better for them to be happy. People live longer, they have better relationships, and it's not about being happy, it's doing things happily. That if somebody is scared of a spider, the interesting thing is that if you ask them to think about a spider, they'll be terrified. If you tell them you're going to bring in a big spider, they're terrified whether you have one or not, which means the fear is in their head. And when people dwell upon bad memories and feel bad about them, it's not because the event's actually happening again, it's what they're thinking about.
Sophie Wise in Bristol has just called. She says, I've been on two of his courses. It got rid of my phobia of spiders in 20 minutes. So is it with the spiders, it's you just, when you think of spiders, you think of them as happy and cuddly and put a smiley face on them?
No, probably not. That's not what I would do.
Go on, tell us what.
That's a piece of it.
We've got 20 minutes, actually.
And that works for some people. For me, what I'm looking for is to find out what it is they're thinking that produces the fear, because I actually could probably get them to think the same way about driving, and they could get a fear of driving or a fear of heights or a fear of something else. And if you can find out how people are thinking, and in many cases, people make humongously larger than life pictures. And so when they think about giant snakes in their head, the pictures are very big and very close and slightly outside of consciousness. So they are so terrified, they don't even really look at them. They're just afraid. And if you can shrink the picture down to the size of a quarter and blink it black and white, and with most fears, if you actually take the memory, and especially with traumatic events, if you take the memory and start at the end, and make it so that it's a reasonable size so you don't feel overwhelmed, and literally run it backwards so people walk backwards and talk backwards, it physiologically flattens out the neurons in the brain.
Does it really? Is this called reframing?
No, it's not.
It's not reframing? Okay. Somebody tell me, tell me if this is NLP, right? I'll give you an example because I read this in a book somewhere. A woman is backing her car out of the garage at work, and as she backs it out, she bumps into her boss's car. Her boss climbs out of the car and points to her and says, I don't believe you've done it, but you've always been absolutely useless and incompetent and you're a dreadful person, and then drives off. And for whatever reason, this woman who's done this, who's been now berated by her boss, and she can't get the car accident out of her mind. How would you work on that?
Well, to me, I would first ask her where the picture is in her mind, and then I'd ask her if it was life-size or larger than life-size, and I'd get her to shrink it down to the size of a quarter, blink it black and white, brrr, that fast.
Does that work?
Well,
can you sleep? What happens if you dream about it?
Pardon?
What happens if you dream about it?
Well, if you dream about it, I'd probably use some substantial hypnosis to get you to do it. But you see, if you're dreaming about it and remembering the dream, if you change the thoughts about how you're thinking about it, you can literally, because see, we grow every night neural cortical pathways, millions and billions of them in our brain. And whenever something repeats itself, it has to go down that exact train. Be it ever so microscopic, if you alter that so it doesn't do it automatically, then it interrupts the pattern and you stop doing it automatically. I do this with post-traumatic stress syndrome from soldiers coming back from the war.
You could do it with them, can you?
Oh, absolutely.
Because that's, I mean, a classic. And of course, in this country, just as in your country, we got people coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan. And it seems to be about a year after they come back. They think they're okay. And then they go back into the battlefield state of mind.
Yes, because those experiences, like most very unpleasant experiences and backing the car in, the feelings, the part of your brain that operates, that calls the endemic nervous system. Those are the connections between all your organs, solid and hollow, and your intestines. They literally have cortical connections between them and are connected through the brainstem. And when you're seeing certain things and you produce these feelings, they rotate in certain directions. Psychologists sometimes call these things emotions, and sometimes I think they're confused about what are physiological responses and what are cognitive emotional responses.
Because you're almost describing there a stress response, which you have when you go like that, and somebody's told you bad news, and you, oh my goodness, and then some people maybe have that the whole time, do they? Is that what happens?
Well, what happens is when they have the response, it keeps going. They circle it forward, they tumble it back,
yeah,
clockwise or counterclockwise. And if you literally can get it so it doesn't do it automatically, which requires that either you do one of two things. You start with the physiology, slow it down, and then reverse it so they actually are feeling the spin in the opposite direction while they're thinking about it. Because it interferes with that cortical connection, so it doesn't do it automatically.
But, can I just give you a reservation here, which is when people get into a state about something, and I don't, by using that phrase, I don't mean to trivialize it. You may have dealt with people who have been raped, or in the last half hour, we've had people talking about sexual abuse in childhood. I'm guessing that almost becomes part of your being, and to try to take your mind out of it and superimpose a different thought must be almost impossible.
No, it's not. I've done it for 4 decades, over and over and over again. I can't tell you how many people tell me that it must be impossible or that they can't do it. But if you're looking at it and it's larger than life, it is impossible.
And this runs counter to some of the stuff from Freud and all of that, does it? The classic psychology.
Freud's dead. Did you know that?
I knew he was dead, but I thought what people do when they go into these therapies is they talk about the stuff, and by talking about it, they get better.
Oh, really, I find they get worse. I really do.
Well, that's classic psychology, isn't it?
Well, classic psychology is based on the notion that if you understand where you went wrong and what's wrong with you, that somehow or other magically you're going to change. I base everything on MRIs, PET scans, everything that neurologists have told me about how the neurochemistry of the brain works.
It's really interesting because you're talking more and more in your answers to my questions about the physiology of the body rather than the thoughts. And so that's leading me to think you might at some point say, of course, there's an even better way of doing this, and that's with medication.
Well, that's not my first choice. I find that medication produces static states of consciousness, that if you take a certain dose of a certain medication, your metabolism will respond consistently to it. So it might make it less bad, but it doesn't give you control over your thoughts or control over your physiology.
Right.
One of the best things I learned through studying hypnosis and meditation was that by directing your mind, thinking in certain patterns, you produce certain brainwave states. Now you can even buy an iPhone app to measure your brainwave patterns. You literally can put a little receptor on your head, and it'll read your brainwave patterns, and you can look at it on your iPhone. I had to use much bigger devices to do this. Initially, what I did was I took a whole lot of people with very serious phobias and made MRIs of them and looked at what was in common, and then ran the same people through patterns where they first thought about it differently. So
okay, I read in my briefing here that some scientists say that actually neuro-linguistic programming is not supported by scientific evidence at all.
Are those social scientists or real scientists?
Well, they're scientists without an adjective before the word scientist.
Well, it makes a big difference.
Does it really?
Because, you see, to me, real science would mean that you could take people who are terrified of elevators, and if you can take 20 of them, and 20 minutes later they can ride up and down without fear, to me, that's a measurement. It's not whether or not statistically it can be repeated by someone who doesn't know how to do it.
I just wonder whether some of those would have got better the first time they attended a session in anything. Because there's a placebo going on. They haven't accepted their problem until now.
Well, you could say they haven't accepted their problem, but they haven't faced their problem in the sense that they've looked at what's scaring them in their own mind, shrank it down to the point where they could deal with it, run it forwards, run it backwards, make it worse, make it better, to the point where they have some mental control over it.
It needs a lot of practice, doesn't it, this thing?
Well, some do, some don't. I've done some that have been very quick and some that take a period of time.
And is there, again, I'm putting to you some of the criticisms of NLP, which is that people say the language around it, you talk about sometimes master practitioners and all that kind of thing, it almost starts to sound like a religious cult.
A religious cult?
Yeah.
Well, actually,
Same phrases.
Practitioners do 7 days of training, which means they get to start practicing. Master practitioners learn another level of skills, which they get to start practicing. There are loads of people that call themselves a neurolinguistic programmer primarily because they have a printer in their house and make themselves a certificate. I'm not interested in what people say about NLP because it isn't alive and it isn't a person and it isn't a religious, because I'm too antisocial to be the head of anything like that. When I'm done teaching, I go home and I don't have followers that come near me because they know better.
So you're not a cult leader in that sense.
No,
You're just a bloke with an idea.
What I am is somebody who has very methodically studied people who succeeded at things. I've studied successful athletes and taught other athletes to be more successful. I've worked with Olympic athletes. I've worked with businessmen, musicians. I've gotten the skills of people who spelled well. And they just did a, quote, scientific study a few years ago in England where we went in and we trained teachers how to teach kids to spell the way people really spell, which isn't phonetically, by the way, because some languages you can spell phonetically, but English doesn't happen to be one of them.
Well, what about, just because I don't mean to interrupt, but I'm just going to ask one more question, which is about your own life and your own state of happiness, or is there stuff in you? Are you afraid of flying? You're going to tell me as you go out the studio, and I'm going to say, oh, I wish I'd asked that. Or is there something where you think you're not quite happy and you're still practicing? Or are you there? You've reached the state.
Well, I'm
Everyone's
not
searching for.
Well, see, I'm not foolish enough to think I'm trying to achieve a state of consciousness. I enjoy most everything I do. I have a very good life. I get to meet all kinds of geniuses and find out how they think about things. Great architects. I met Buckminster Fuller, Linus Pauling, Gregory Bateson.
But it doesn't make you happy, all that. It's made you happy. It doesn't make everybody else happy.
Well, it's not in this world to make everybody happy. That's not my job.
But maybe you're just a happy person. That's what I'm wondering.
Well, I don't think I started
lucky.
out that way. I had to have something interesting to do. I think when humans kind of have a mission in their life where they're trying to do something that they enjoy. Some people enjoy painting, and then they become great painters, and they become involved in it. I believe humans are a lot happier when they have a purpose, and they need to find what the purpose is and what they enjoy doing. The skills that I've developed are to teach people how people who are successful at things. Even we made a series here called The Secrets of Success. When I come to London, I work for a company called NLP Life Training. They put on the seminars I do here. And they wanted me to demonstrate on tape how you go and find out the skills. So we took one of your Olympic athletes, and he talked about how he thinks about things so that somebody else who wants to be a great athlete can think the same way he does and achieve greater success. See, to me, this isn't a therapy. This isn't something where you go in and repair a person. That's not what this is about. This is where you optimize the life of a person by giving them a variety of states of consciousness and varieties of ways to think so that they have choices.
Thank you very much indeed, Dr. Richard Bandler, co-creator of Neuro-Linguistic Programming and author of The Secrets of Being Happy. And look at this, the next record